The first time Ethan Cole saw the house, it looked like it had been stitched onto the edge of the world by someone stubborn enough to argue with wind. It sat alone on a spine of red rock above Lake Powell's quieter fingers, one of those long, twisting inlets where the water turned dark and glassy, and the cliffs leaned in close like they were listening. No neighbors, no porch lights down the road, just sandstone, scrub, and a sky so wide it made a man feel either free or exposed. Ethan told himself he wanted free. That was the lie he'd been feeding his own mind since he signed his last discharge papers, since he packed the duffel and drove until the radio turned to static, since he started choosing places where nobody asked questions and nothing looked familiar enough to pull his memories awake. He had learned, the hard way, that peace was not something you found. Peace was something you defended. Rex rode in the passenger seat with his chin resting on the window ledge, eyes half-lidded, ears still catching everything. A German shepherd built like a working animal, not a show dog, thick neck, scar at the edge of his muzzle, paws that looked like they belonged to something that could break through a door if it had to. Ethan had rescued him from a cage in a county impound 2 states back, and the shelter volunteer had said, like it was a warning and a compliment at the same time, he watches people like he's measuring them. Ethan had understood that kind of watching. He pulled into the gravel drive and killed the engine. The silence that followed felt huge. Rex didn't move right away. He kept staring at the empty land, reading it in some language Ethan couldn't hear. "What do you think?" Ethan asked softly, like the dog had an opinion on mortgages and property lines. Rex's tail thumped once against the seat. Not happy, not unhappy, just present. That was enough. The rental was paid for 1 month in cash. The owner, an older man with sun-cracked skin and a cigarette voice, handed Ethan a ring of keys and said, "Water pressure's fussy. Don't run the shower if the dishwasher's on." Ethan nodded like he cared. He didn't. He wasn't there to cook. He wasn't there to shower long enough to enjoy it. He was there to go quiet, to let the world move on without him. The first 3 days almost let him believe that could happen. He woke before dawn out of habit. He made coffee strong enough to taste like burnt earth. He walked Rex along the ridge and watched the lake change colors as sunlight slid down the cliffs. He read nothing. He spoke to nobody. He let the hours pass like dust. And then, on the 4th afternoon, a child appeared. She came up the trail from the waterline, carrying a bright blue bucket that was too big for her arms. The sun behind her made her hair look copper, and when she saw Rex, she stopped so fast the bucket swung and sloshed. Ethan froze on instinct. Not because he didn't like kids, because kids meant people. People meant questions. Questions meant anchors. The girl stared at Rex like he was a myth she'd heard about in a book. Rex stared back, perfectly still. Then she took 1 step forward. "Hi," she said, like the word was a brave thing. Ethan kept his voice even. "You're on private property." She blinked. "Oh, I didn't know. I'm sorry." Her eyes flicked to Rex. "Is he yours?" Rex's ears twitched. The dog didn't look at Ethan for permission. He looked at the girl's hands. Empty. No stick, no rock, no fierce sweat. Just a bucket and the smell of sun and lake water. Ethan exhaled through his nose. "Yeah, he's mine." The girl smiled, sudden and bright. "He's huge." "He's working," Ethan said automatically, even though Rex hadn't worn a vest in months. The girl took another cautious step. "Can I say hi?" Ethan should have said no. He should have shut it down, clean and quick, like closing a door before a draft gets in. But Rex shifted his weight, almost imperceptibly, and lowered his head a fraction. Not submission. Permission. Ethan watched the girl's face, how she held her breath, how her fingers trembled with excitement when she reached out. She scratched Rex behind the ear, and Rex let out a deep, pleased sigh that sounded like relief. The girl's eyes widened. "He likes me." Ethan heard himself ask, "Where do you live?" She pointed back down the trail. "Down there, the trailer by the old boat ramp." Ethan's gaze followed her finger. He hadn't noticed the trailer before. From the ridge, it was half hidden behind tamarisk trees, sun-bleached and small enough to look temporary. The kind of place people lived when they were waiting for something to change. The girl shifted the bucket. "My name's Nora." Ethan hesitated. Names were hooks. Names made you real. "Ethan," he said anyway. "And that's Rex." Nora grinned at Rex like they were already friends. I found shells. Shells? Ethan echoed, confused. Lake Powell didn't have ocean shells. Nora lifted the bucket proudly. Inside were little white fragments, old clam shells, sun-bleached and cracked. They're like treasure. Ethan almost smiled. Almost. Then Rex stiffened. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. The dog simply went from relaxed to locked in, muscles coiling under fur like someone had flipped a switch inside him. Nora didn't notice. She was too busy digging in her bucket. Ethan noticed everything. Rex's ears angled toward the far side of the ridge, where the trail curved around a boulder field and disappeared into scrub. Ethan's hand moved without thinking, palms sliding along Rex's collar. Hey, he murmured, low enough Nora wouldn't hear. What is it? Rex's mouth closed. His breathing changed. His gaze stayed pinned. Ethan's eyes followed it. At first, he saw nothing, just heat shimmer and rock and the brittle green of desert plants. Then, he saw movement, 2 men coming up the trail fast, not hikers. Their strides were too purposeful, too heavy. Boots, jeans, baseball caps low over faces. One of them carried something long under his arm, wrapped in a towel, not a fishing rod. Nora looked up and waved. That's... Ethan cut her off quietly. Get behind me. Nora blinked, confused. Ethan's voice sharpened, just enough to make her obey. Now. She stepped back, the bucket bumping her knee. Rex shifted in front of her like a wall. The men reached them, breath hard, eyes already scanning. They looked at Ethan like he was an inconvenience. The one in front forced a grin. Afternoon? Ethan didn't return it. Can I help you? The man's eyes flicked to Nora, then to Rex, then back to Ethan. We're looking for the kid's mom. Nora's small hand found Ethan's shirt without thinking. Her fingers clenched. Ethan kept his tone flat. Why? The second man, broader, jaw like a cinder block, stepped forward. Because she owes somebody, and we're here to collect. Nora whispered, Mom didn't do anything. The first man leaned slightly like he could smell fear. There you are. Nora, right? Tell your mom to come out. Ethan felt the desert air tighten. Rex's growl started low, deep in his chest. Not loud enough to be a bark, but strong enough to be a warning. The broad man's gaze snapped to the dog. His grin faded. That thing bites? Ethan's eyes didn't leave their faces. He doesn't have to. The first man laughed too sharp. Look, tough guy, this doesn't involve you. It involves a child, Ethan said. The man's smile turned ugly. So does everything, when you know how to use it. He stepped closer, reaching as if to grab Nora's arm. Ethan's voice dropped into something colder than anger. Don't! The man paused, calculating. His eyes moved over Ethan. Size, posture, stillness. The way Ethan didn't flinch. The way Rex didn't look away. For a split second, the man looked uncertain. Then he chose violence anyway. His hand shot out. Rex exploded. The dog didn't bark. He didn't waste sound. He lunged forward with pure, controlled force, teeth flashing. He clamped down on the man's forearm with a snap that sounded like a branch breaking. The man screamed. Nora screamed too, high and terrified. The broad man jerked back, reaching under his jacket. Ethan moved faster. He stepped into the broad man's space and drove his palm into the man's throat. Hard enough to cut off breath, not hard enough to kill. The man stumbled, choking. Ethan followed with a knee to the thigh that buckled the leg and dropped him to one knee. The first man was still screaming, trying to yank his arm free from Rex's jaws. Rex held him like a vice, eyes cold, body braced. Ethan's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Rex, release. Rex let go instantly, stepping back but staying between Nora and the bleeding man. The first man clutched his arm, face twisted. You're dead, he rasped, spitting dust and rage. You hear me? You don't know who you just... Ethan's gaze stayed calm. Leave! The broad man wheezed, still trying to breathe. He pulled himself up, eyes burning with humiliation. The first man pointed shakily. This is your last warning. That trailer is coming down. That land is coming with it. He grabbed his partner by the shoulder and dragged him back down the trail, leaving a streak of blood on the rocks. When they were gone, the desert went quiet again. Too quiet. Nora was shaking. Tears slid down her cheeks without sound. Her bucket had tipped, shells scattered like broken teeth. Ethan crouched in front of her, lowering himself so he wasn't towering. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head hard. They always come. Mom tells me to stay inside when I see trucks." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Your mom's name?" Nora hesitated. "Marina." The name hung in Ethan's mind like a strange echo. Not the sound of it, what it meant. Sea. Water. Something that didn't belong in a desert. He stood. His eyes scanned the land toward the trailer by the boat ramp. A thin line of smoke rose from a chimney pipe. Someone was home. Ethan looked down at Rex. The dog was still bristling, body angled, listening for returning footsteps. Ethan didn't want to get involved. He had promised himself he wouldn't. But the sight of Nora's small, shaking shoulders made that promise feel like a coward's luxury. "Take me to your mom," he said. Nora blinked up at him, hope and fear tangled together. "Really?" Ethan nodded once. "Really?" They walked down the trail, Rex pacing on the outside like a guardian, never letting Nora drift out of reach. The trailer grew larger as they approached, patched metal siding, a sagging porch, a wind chime made from bottle caps. It was the kind of place a person could pretend was temporary until years passed and it became permanent. Nora knocked and yelled, "Mom!" The door flew open so fast it banged the frame. A woman stepped out with a wrench in her hand, like she'd grabbed the nearest weapon. She was in her early 30s, face sun-worn but sharp, hair pulled into a messy bun, eyes the color of storm clouds over water. She took one look at Nora's tears and froze. Then her gaze snapped to Ethan, and her stance tightened. "Who are you?" Ethan kept his hands visible, palms open. "My name's Ethan Cole. I'm renting the cabin up the ridge." Her eyes flicked to Rex and widened slightly. Not fear, more like recognition. "That's a trained dog." Ethan didn't deny it. Marina's voice went hard. "Nora, inside." Nora didn't move. She clung to Rex's fur. Ethan said, "2 men came up the trail. They tried to grab her." Marina's face drained of color in a way that looked practiced, like she'd been waiting for that moment. "Did they hurt her?" "No." Marina's breath left her in a shudder. She stared at Nora's face, then at the scattered shells in the dirt, then back at Ethan. "Why did you bring her here?" Ethan's eyes didn't flinch. "Because it's not safe for her to walk alone when men like that are looking for you." Marina's grip tightened on the wrench. "You should have called the sheriff." Ethan almost laughed, not because it was funny, because he'd heard that advice in places where sheriffs didn't show up until it was too late, if they showed up at all. "I don't know your sheriff," Ethan said, "but I know predators when I see them." Marina's eyes narrowed. "Then you know when to walk away." Ethan looked past her into the trailer. It was clean, but the kind of clean that was fighting a losing battle. Laundry stacked neatly, a table covered in papers, a laptop open, a map spread out with handwritten circles. Marina saw him see it. Her voice dropped. "This isn't your problem." Ethan's gaze returned to Nora, who was still trembling against Rex. Rex nuzzled her gently, and Nora's breath hitched like she was trying not to cry again. Ethan's voice softened, just a fraction. "It became my problem when they reached for her." Marina's face flickered with something complicated. Anger, exhaustion, gratitude she didn't want to admit. She stepped aside. "Fine, come in. But if this gets worse, you take Nora and you leave. You hear me?" Ethan didn't answer right away, because he knew he couldn't promise that. Inside, the trailer smelled like coffee and engine grease. Nora went straight to the couch and curled into a blanket like she'd practiced disappearing. Rex lay at her feet, head up, eyes still scanning. Marina set the wrench down and rubbed her forehead. Up close, Ethan noticed bruising at her wrist, faint yellow-green, like it was days old. Not from a fall, from someone grabbing too hard. Ethan pointed at the papers. "Who are they?" Marina's jaw flexed. "A company called Red Mesa Renewables." Ethan waited. Marina's laugh was bitter. "Sounds nice, doesn't it? Solar fields, green energy, jobs. They came in with big smiles and bigger money. And you didn't sell?" Marina's eyes sharpened. "This land isn't just dirt. It's my father's lease. It's evidence." That word cut through Ethan's fatigue like a hook. He didn't press yet. He let the silence do the work. Marina watched him the way someone watches a storm line on the horizon, deciding whether to board windows or run. Finally, she said, I used to work for them. Ethan's eyebrows lifted slightly. Marina's voice tightened. Not here, in Phoenix. Accounting, contracts. I signed papers I didn't understand until I did, and when I did, I copied them. I took them out. Ethan's gut went cold. Marina leaned forward, hands clasped like she was holding herself together. They're not building solar fields. Not really. Ethan looked at the map. The circles were around narrow inlets, hidden coves of water, places a boat could slip into unseen. He remembered the way the lake fingered into sandstone like veins. Marina whispered, "They're using the renewables project to cover something else. They're moving equipment through the water at night. Containers, chemicals. I saw invoices for water treatment modules that cost 10 times what they should. I saw shipping manifests that didn't match weights. I saw payout schedules to Shell subcontractors that never existed." Ethan kept his face still, but inside him, something old woke up. Something that recognized this shape of evil, clean on paper, dirty in the dark. Marina's eyes glistened, not with tears yet, but with fear held back by stubbornness. My dad found something too. He used to fish these coves. He saw boats moving without lights. He saw men unloading into caves under the rock. Then he died. The sentence landed heavy. Ethan didn't ask how. He didn't need to. The bruise on her wrist, the men on the trail, the way she'd opened the door with a wrench. This was a woman living in the shadow of a threat that didn't bother pretending. Marina swallowed. They offered me money to shut up. Then they offered me threats. Then they offered Nora. Ethan's fingers curled slowly into a fist. Rex's ears lifted at the change in the room, as if the dog could hear the word threat in the way Marina breathed. Marina's voice dropped to almost nothing. They said if I didn't sign over the lease and leave, they'd make sure I was declared unfit, that Nora would end up somewhere else, that no one would believe me. Ethan stared at the papers again. Why haven't you gone to the feds? Marina's laugh cracked. I tried. I sent emails. I called hotlines. I mailed copies. And then a man in a nice shirt showed up and told me my complaint had been received and would be reviewed. The next day, my bank account was frozen for fraud investigation. The week after that, my truck stopped working. Then those men started coming. Ethan's voice was quiet. So, someone's inside. Marina looked at him sharply. Yes. Silence stretched. Outside wind rattled the bottle cap chime. Nora slept on the couch now, exhaustion finally winning. Rex stayed awake, his body positioned so if anyone opened that trailer door, they'd meet him first. Ethan stood slowly. Pack a bag. Marina blinked. What? Pack a bag for Nora, Ethan said. If they come back tonight, this trailer is a coffin. Marina's pride flared. I'm not running. Ethan met her stare. You don't have to run, but you do have to plan. Marina's breathing quickened like she wanted to argue, but the truth behind his words was too heavy to ignore. She moved to a small closet and began pulling clothes out with quick, efficient motions, jaw clenched. You're not a sheriff, she muttered. You're not a cop. No, Ethan agreed. I'm worse. Marina glanced at him, trying to read the meaning. Ethan didn't offer details. He'd learned that the less you said, the safer you stayed. That night, Ethan brought Marina and Nora up to the cabin on the ridge. Marina didn't like it. She didn't like leaving her trailer and her papers and the fragile illusion of control. But she followed because Nora followed Rex, and Rex followed Ethan. And sometimes survival was just a chain of trust. Ethan's cabin was sparse. 2 bedrooms, a small living room, a kitchen that smelled like coffee and gun oil. Marina noticed the way Ethan checked windows before turning on lights. She noticed the way he placed his keys in the same spot. She noticed the quiet discipline in everything he did. She didn't comment. Ethan gave Nora the smaller bedroom. Nora fell asleep in minutes. Rex curled beside her like a living shield. Marina sat at the table with her papers spread out, hands trembling now that the immediate danger had faded enough to let fear rise. Ethan poured her coffee. You have copies of everything? Marina nodded. On a flash drive and in cloud storage. If they haven't already, Ethan cut in. Assume they have. Marina's mouth tightened. Then what's the point? Ethan's eyes stayed steady. The point is time. We buy time until the right eyes see what you have. Marina's laugh was bitter again. And how do you plan to make that happen? Shoot your way into Washington? Ethan's expression didn't change, but something behind it sharpened. I know someone. Marina stared. Who? Ethan hesitated for half a second. Then he pulled out his phone, not the one he used for ordinary calls, but the older one that only turned on when he needed it. He typed a number from memory. It rang twice. A voice answered, tired and alert. This better be good. Ethan's tone stayed calm. Drew, it's Ethan. A pause. Then, well, damn. I figured you'd fallen off the planet. Working on it, Ethan said. I need a favor. The voice, Drew Harper, was the kind of man who didn't ask why first. He asked what? Where are you? Utah, Ethan said. Lake Powell. Another pause. Longer. That's remote. It was supposed to be. Marina watched Ethan carefully, like she was seeing a second outline around him now, something more than a quiet man renting a cabin. Ethan continued. I've got a woman and her kid. They're being pressured off land by a renewables company that's using the water inlets as cover for something illegal. Drew's voice sharpened. What kind of illegal? Ethan looked at Marina. Marina swallowed. Chemical transport, possibly dumping. Possibly worse. Ethan relayed it. And they've got muscle. Drew exhaled, slow. You sure you're not just bored? Ethan's gaze drifted toward the hallway where Nora slept. Not bored. The line went quiet for a beat. Then Drew said, Send me what you have. And Ethan, don't play hero if you don't have to. Ethan's voice was flat. Too late. After the call, Marina stared at him. Who is Drew? Ethan didn't answer directly. He knows how to put information in front of people who can't ignore it. Marina's fingers gripped her coffee mug. People like who? Ethan's eyes were distant. People who prefer darkness. Marina shivered, not from cold. The next morning, the first attack came dressed as paperwork. A white truck rolled up the ridge with an official seal on the door. County Water Safety Division. A man stepped out wearing a reflective vest and a smile that didn't touch his eyes. He carried a clipboard like a weapon. Marina stiffened at the cabin window. They found us. Ethan didn't move fast. He moved calm. Stay back. He opened the door before the man could knock. The inspector's smile widened. Morning, I'm here for an inspection, reports of illegal occupancy and improper waste disposal. Ethan's gaze stayed unreadable. This is a rental. The inspector's eyes flicked to Rex's silhouette behind Ethan. He swallowed, then recovered. We still have to verify compliance, especially with a minor on premises. Marina's breath caught at the words. Ethan's voice stayed level. Who filed the report? The inspector shrugged like it was just procedure. Anonymous. Ethan held the stare long enough to make the inspector's smile strain. Then Ethan stepped aside. Come in. Marina's eyes widened. Ethan? Ethan didn't look at her. Let him see what he wants to see. The inspector walked through the cabin, making notes, opening cabinets, peering into the bathroom like he expected to find a crime in the sink. He paused at the bedroom door where Nora slept. Ethan's voice snapped, low and lethal. That room is off limits. The inspector lifted his hands. Just doing my job. Ethan stepped closer. The air changed. Rex's growl started soft behind them. The inspector cleared his throat and backed away. Fine, but if there's a child, we'll have to schedule. Ethan cut him off. You'll schedule nothing. You have what you need. Leave. The inspector's smile returned, forced. You don't get to tell me. Ethan leaned in slightly, voice quiet enough it felt like a secret. If you come back with another clipboard, I'll file my own report. About you. About why you're taking orders from a private company. About how your name will look on an affidavit. The inspector's eyes widened. His mouth opened. Ethan didn't give him time. Leave. The man left. Marina stood frozen. How did you... Ethan's gaze stayed on the road where the truck disappeared. Because men like that aren't brave, they're rented. The second attack came as sabotage. When Ethan walked down to Marina's trailer to retrieve the remaining papers, he found the door pried open. Inside, drawers had been dumped, the mattress sliced, the map torn, the laptop gone. Marina stood in the doorway like she'd been punched. Her hands shook, but no sound came out. Ethan moved through the wreckage with cold efficiency, scanning for what mattered. He found the flash drive, not because they missed it, because they left it. It sat on the table, placed neatly on top of the torn map like a message. Marina whispered, "They want us to know they can reach us." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Or they want you to think this is your only copy." Marina stared at him. "You think they don't know about cloud storage?" Ethan's eyes were hard. "I think they want you to panic. Panic makes people sloppy. Sloppy makes them easy." Marina's voice cracked. "What do we do?" Ethan looked at the waterline, at the dark cave mouths under the sandstone where the lake lapped quietly. "We find what they're hiding. We stop guessing." That afternoon, Ethan hiked along the ridge with Rex scouting ahead. He moved like he used to, quiet, controlled, reading terrain as if it was a language. He reached a point overlooking one of the narrow inlets Marina had circled on her map. From above, it looked peaceful. Water dark and still. Rock walls high enough to hide anything. Ethan lay flat behind a boulder and watched. An hour passed. Then, just before dusk, he saw it. A boat slid into the inlet without running lights. Low profile, dark hull, moving with practiced precision. Two men guided it toward the shadow of a cave at the far end. A third man waited at the cave mouth with a headlamp covered in red film. They weren't fishing. They weren't sightseeing. They were unloading something heavy. Ethan's stomach went tight. Rex's ears pinned forward. The dog's body was rigid, but silent. Ethan watched the men drag a container into the cave, metal about the size of a small coffin. Then another. Then another. The boat backed out and vanished into open water like it had never been there. Ethan stayed watching until the sky went purple and the stars came out sharp. Then he pulled out his phone and called Drew again. Drew answered on the first ring. "Talk to me." Ethan's voice was quiet. "I found their drop point. Evidence. I can get it," Ethan said. "But we're not dealing with amateurs." Drew's voice turned grim. "Then don't go inside the cave alone." Ethan's eyes tracked the darkness where the cave waited. "I won't." But as he said it, he knew something was shifting, because the land wasn't the goal anymore. The land was a lid, and underneath it was something that could poison water, people, whole communities. If Marina's paperwork was true, they weren't just stealing property. They were erasing problems. That night, the real muscle arrived. Ethan felt it before he saw it, because Rex felt it first. Rex woke with a low growl, body stiff, nose lifting as if scent itself carried warning. Ethan sat up in bed instantly, hand already moving toward the lockbox by the nightstand. In the living room, Marina stood frozen, listening. "Do you hear that?" Ethan didn't answer. He moved to the window and peered out. Headlights climbed the ridge road, two vehicles, spaced apart, moving slow. Not a drunk tourist. Not a ranger. They stopped just short of the cabin, lights off. Silhouettes stepped out, 6 of them, moving with controlled economy. Professionals. Ethan's pulse went cold and steady, the way it did before everything went loud. Marina whispered, "What do they want?" Ethan didn't look away from the window. "Nora." Marina's face went white. Ethan grabbed his radio earpiece, small, discreet. He'd rigged a simple sensor line earlier that day using fishing wire and cheap motion alarms. It was crude, but it gave him one thing. Warning. The alarms didn't chirp, because these men weren't walking through brush like clumsy thugs. They were coming up the road like they owned it. Ethan crouched beside Rex, voice barely above breath. "Guard!" Rex's body trembled with restrained force. Marina backed toward Nora's room, shaking. "I'm not letting them—" Ethan cut her off. "Take Nora into the bathroom. Lock it. Get in the tub. Stay low." Marina's eyes filled with panic. "That's insane." "It's cover," Ethan said. "It's the only thing in here that stops rounds." Marina's breath hitched. She nodded once and ran. Ethan moved through the cabin, turning off lights, positioning himself behind the kitchen counter, where he had a clear line of sight to the front door and windows. The men approached. He saw the shape of a suppressed rifle. He saw the way one man checked angles like he'd done it 1,000 times. Then he heard the soft click of metal against wood. A breach tool. The door didn't slam in with a kick. It opened like they had a key. Ethan's throat tightened. That meant someone had copies. That meant someone had planned. The lead man stepped inside, weapon up, scanning. His face was hidden behind a low cap and a neck gaiter. His eyes were calm, empty. He raised a hand, signaling his team silently. 2 men peeled left, 2 right. 1 stayed at the door. 1 moved deeper. Ethan waited until the second man crossed the threshold fully. Then he moved. He didn't shoot first. He hit the lights. Not to help himself, to ruin their night vision. The cabin exploded into brightness as Ethan triggered the floodlight panel he'd rigged on the porch earlier, angled to reflect through the windows. The lead man flinched just half a second. Half a second was a lifetime. Rex launched. The dog hit the nearest intruder with brutal force, slamming into his legs and taking him down. The man grunted, surprised more than pained, trying to bring his rifle around. Ethan was already on him. He drove his knee into the man's forearm, snapping the grip loose, then slammed the man's head into the floor hard enough to end the fight without ending the life. Another man swung toward Ethan with a suppressed pistol. Ethan sidestepped, caught the wrist, and twisted until the bones protested. The pistol fell. Ethan's elbow followed into the man's jaw. The cabin filled with muffled chaos. Boots, grunts, the thud of bodies, Rex's growl like an engine. Then a voice, calm and irritated, cut through from outside. "Stop!" 1 word, and everything shifted, because professionals didn't speak during an op unless the plan changed. Ethan heard a soft metallic sound from the ridge outside the window, a weapon being shouldered with patience. A sniper. Ethan's blood chilled. He ducked behind the counter as a round punched through the wall where his head had been a second ago. Plaster dust exploded. The shot was suppressed, but the impact was loud enough to shake the room. Marina screamed from the bathroom. Nora cried, high and terrified. Ethan's eyes snapped to Rex. The dog was crouched low, ready to move, waiting for Ethan's word. Ethan didn't have time for a clean plan. He had seconds before another shot. He grabbed a metal baking sheet from the counter, cheap, flimsy. He threw it into the hallway. The sniper fired at movement. The round tore the sheet and buried in the wall. Ethan sprinted low to the side window, yanked it open, and rolled out into the night. Cold desert air hit him like a slap. He moved along the cabin wall, staying below window line, listening. The sniper was positioned uphill, near a boulder cluster. Ethan could see the faint outline now. 1 man, prone, rifle steady. Ethan's mind narrowed into a tunnel. He lifted his own weapon, but he didn't fire, because he saw something else. Another silhouette behind the sniper. Someone approaching from the shadows, slow and careful, like a predator stalking a predator. Not one of the team. A different player. The approaching figure moved with an ease that didn't belong to a tourist, didn't belong to a ranger. He wore plain clothes, no tactical vest, no visible weapon. He looked ordinary. Ordinary in a way that felt deliberate. The sniper's head tilted slightly, sensing movement. The ordinary man stepped closer, and in that moment, Ethan understood something terrifying. Red Mesa wasn't cleaning up with muscle. They'd hired someone to erase. The ordinary man reached the sniper and spoke softly, too far for Ethan to hear the words. The sniper's posture shifted. Then, without warning, the ordinary man snapped the sniper's neck with a quick, efficient motion, like closing a book. Ethan's stomach dropped. The ordinary man looked down at the body, expression unreadable, then turned his head slightly, eyes scanning the ridge. His gaze found Ethan. Even in the dark, Ethan felt it like a spotlight. The man smiled faintly like they shared a private joke. Then he raised a hand, 2 fingers, like a casual salute, and walked away into the darkness. Ethan stayed frozen for a beat too long, mind racing. Who was that? Why kill his own side? Unless the sniper was a loose end, unless someone higher up had decided the whole operation was compromised, unless the men inside the cabin weren't there to scare Marina into signing anymore. They were there to remove witnesses. Ethan crawled back inside through the window. The intruders in the cabin were down. Rex and Ethan had neutralized them fast, but the cost was clear. This was escalating beyond land grabs and threats. Marina burst out of the bathroom with Nora in her arms, shaking so hard she could barely stand. Nora clung to Rex's neck when he returned to them, burying her face in his fur like it was the only safe place left. Marina looked at Ethan with raw fear. That wasn't normal. That wasn't. Ethan's voice was low and hard. They're done negotiating. Marina's mouth opened, but no words came. Ethan moved to the table, grabbed the flash drive, and shoved it into his pocket. We leave, now! Marina's eyes flashed with defiance even through terror. I'm not, Ethan cut in, voice like steel. You want to fight? Fine. But you don't fight from a cabin with windows. You fight where you have witnesses, where law has no choice but to show up. Marina's breath hitched. Ethan looked down at Nora. Can you be brave for me? Nora's face was blotchy with tears. She nodded, small and fierce. Ethan nodded back once. Good. Then we're going to town. They drove toward the nearest small town, Page, Arizona, under a sky full of stars that looked indifferent to human fear. Ethan kept his lights off as long as he could, using the moon and the pale glow of the road. Behind them, far on the ridge, he saw headlights appear and disappear like hunting eyes. They weren't alone. In town, Ethan didn't go to a motel. He went to the place with cameras, people, noise, and walls thicker than a cabin. He went to the police station. The desk sergeant looked up as Ethan walked in with Marina and Nora and Rex at his heel, the dog's gaze scanning the room like it was a threat map. The sergeant's eyebrows lifted. Can I help you? Ethan's voice was calm, but it carried weight. We need protective custody. Marina's eyes widened. Protective? Ethan didn't look away from the sergeant. She has evidence of a corporate dumping operation using Lake Powell inlets. They just sent a 6-man team to take her child. The sergeant's expression shifted from bored to wary. That's a big claim. Ethan leaned forward slightly, gaze locked. Then call your supervisor, and call the feds, because the men who came tonight weren't county thugs. A door opened behind the desk, and a woman stepped out, lieutenant's bars on her collar, hair pulled back, face tired but sharp. She looked at Ethan, then at Marina, then at Nora, clinging to Rex. What happened? She asked. Ethan answered in clipped, precise facts, the way you report a situation when feelings get you killed. While he spoke, Marina found her voice again, spilling her story in broken pieces. Invoices, shell contracts, cave drop points, her father's death, the threats, the freezing of her accounts. The lieutenant's eyes narrowed with each detail. When Marina finished, the lieutenant said, What's on the drive? Marina looked at Ethan, then swallowed. Everything. The lieutenant nodded slowly. We're calling the EPA Criminal Division, and we're calling Homeland Security. Marina blinked. Homeland? Why would... The lieutenant's gaze stayed steady. Because if you're right about containers moving through caves, that's not just environmental crime. That's trafficking. That's something bigger. Ethan felt the chill settle deeper. Bigger. That ordinary man on the ridge hadn't been hired muscle. He'd been a message from the top. 2 hours later, while Marina and Nora sat in a small interview room with a blanket around Nora's shoulders and Rex stationed at her feet, Ethan stood in the hallway and watched officers move with heightened urgency. He also watched something else. A man in a suit entered the station, not a Fed, not local. He walked like a person who knew the building already. He didn't look around like a visitor. He moved like an owner. Ethan's shoulders tightened. The man approached the lieutenant, shook her hand, smiled. Then he glanced toward the interview room. His eyes flicked to Rex. They paused, just a fraction too long. Recognition. He spoke quietly to the lieutenant. She nodded, then led him toward Marina's room. Ethan stepped forward, blocking the hall. The suited man stopped, smile polite. Excuse me? Ethan's voice was calm. Who are you? The man's smile held, but his eyes went cold. Federal liaison. Ethan didn't move. Badge? The man chuckled softly. I don't need... Ethan's gaze sharpened. Badge. The lieutenant frowned, confusion flickering. Sir? The suited man's smile tightened. Lieutenant, this is sensitive. Please. Ethan saw it then, the subtle shift of the man's hand toward his jacket pocket. Not for a badge, for something else. Ethan moved first. He grabbed the man's wrist and slammed him against the wall, pinning his arm up high. The man grunted, shock flashing across his face. Officers shouted, hands reached for weapons. Ethan's voice cut through. Check his pocket. The lieutenant hesitated, then moved in, yanked a wallet out. It wasn't a badge, it was a silenced pistol, compact and ready. The hallway went dead silent. The suited man's smile vanished. His eyes turned flat, empty. Ethan's stomach dropped as certainty hit. "They're inside," Ethan said quietly. The lieutenant's face drained of color. Ethan's voice went colder. "Lock the building down, now." Chaos snapped into motion. Doors slammed, radios crackled, officers moved. Ethan shoved the suited man to the floor and kicked the pistol away. Rex, sensing the danger, stood abruptly in the interview room doorway, body between Nora and everything else, growl vibrating like thunder. Nora's small hands clutched his fur, eyes wide. Marina's face went white. "Ethan, what is happening?" Ethan didn't sugarcoat. "They're not just trying to shut you up. They're trying to erase you." And then the lights went out. Not a flicker, not a storm surge. A clean cut, like someone had flipped a switch on the whole block. Emergency lights kicked on a half-second later, painting the station in dim red glow. Ethan's mind raced. This was no longer a company trying to steal land. This was a network that could cut power, plant a fake liaison, send a hit team into a cabin. This was organized, disciplined, and angry. Somewhere outside, in the red-lit parking lot, Ethan saw movement, shadows sliding between cars. He heard suppressed pops, quiet, controlled gunfire, followed by a thud. An officer screamed. Ethan's jaw clenched. He turned to Marina and Nora. "Stay behind Rex. Do not move." Marina's eyes flashed. "I'm not leaving my daughter." Ethan's voice was iron. "Then you stay alive." Rex's ears pinned forward, body coiled, ready. Ethan moved toward the front of the station, using desks and walls, listening. The attackers weren't rushing. They were cutting the building into pieces. A team outside, a team inside. They wanted Marina. They wanted the drive. They wanted no witnesses. Ethan's world narrowed again. The old familiar tunnel where fear became fuel and time slowed into clean decisions. He saw an attacker slip in through the side door. Black clothes, suppressed pistol up, moving like he'd practiced in rooms like this. Ethan stepped out and dropped him with a single shot to the shoulder, non-lethal, precise. The man went down with a grunt, weapon skittering. Another attacker appeared behind him. Rex growled. Ethan's head snapped toward the sound. He saw an officer down in the hall, blood on the floor, eyes wide with shock. The attacker advanced. Ethan didn't have the angle, but Rex did. Rex launched forward with a snarl, hitting the attacker's legs and driving him down hard. The man slammed into the floor, pistol flying. Rex's jaws clamped onto the man's forearm before he could reach for it again. The attacker screamed through clenched teeth. Ethan stepped in and finished it with a brutal elbow strike. Marina stared, trembling. "Rex!" Nora buried her face in Rex's back as he returned, tail stiff, still scanning. Then Ethan heard something that made his blood run cold. A voice over a handheld radio in the darkness outside, calm and cultured. "Terminate the witness, recover the drive. Not arrest. Not detain. Terminate." Ethan's gaze flicked to the suited man on the floor, now being cuffed by two officers. The man smiled faintly, even in defeat, because he knew something Ethan didn't, because he knew help wasn't coming fast enough. Ethan leaned close to the lieutenant, voice urgent. "Where's your evidence locker?" She blinked. "Downstairs." Ethan's mind clicked. Downstairs meant concrete, cover, a place to hold. He grabbed Marina's arm gently but firmly. "We're moving." Marina clutched Nora tighter. "No!" Ethan's voice left no room. "Now!" They moved down the stairwell, Rex first, Ethan behind, officers following. The building above filled with muffled pops and shouts. In the basement, the station's concrete walls muffled the chaos into a dull roar. The lieutenant slammed the heavy door and barred it. For a moment, they were in a pocket of breathing space. Marina collapsed onto a bench, shaking. Nora sat beside her, arms wrapped around Rex's neck. Rex stayed standing, eyes fixed on the door, listening. Ethan crouched beside Marina. "Give me the drive." Marina's fingers trembled as she pulled it from Ethan's pocket and held it tight. "If they get it," Ethan's voice was low. "They won't." Marina's eyes filled with tears now, exhaustion finally cracking her shell. "I didn't want any of this. I just wanted Nora safe." Ethan's face softened for a fraction. "I know." Above them, the gunfire stopped. That was worse than continuing. Silence meant a plan. Then, a soft scrape at the basement door. Not a frantic pounding, a patient touch. Ethan's pulse slowed, cold and steady. Someone on the other side said calmly, "Open the door." The voice was the same cultured tone Ethan had heard outside. The lieutenant's face went pale. Ethan whispered to her, "How many exits?" "None," she mouthed. The voice outside sighed, almost amused. "You can stay down there and suffocate in your courage, or you can open the door, and we can make this quick." Marina clutched Nora. Nora's small body shook. Rex's growl deepened, vibrating through the concrete room. Ethan's mind raced. They couldn't hold forever. They couldn't fight a whole network from a basement. So Ethan did what he'd learned to do when trapped. He made the trap his. He leaned close to Marina. "Do you trust me?" Marina's eyes searched his, terrified and desperate. "I don't even know you." Ethan's voice was steady. "You know what I'm willing to do for your child?" Marina swallowed hard. Then she nodded once. Ethan looked at the lieutenant. "Do you have a backup generator?" She blinked. "For the radios, yes." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Can you power one outlet?" The lieutenant hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe." Ethan pointed at the wall of storage shelves. "You have anything that can make smoke? Fire extinguisher? Chemicals?" The lieutenant stared. "Why?" Ethan's gaze stayed locked on the door. "Because if they come through that door, we don't let them see." The voice outside grew slightly sharper. "Last chance." Ethan whispered, "Do it." The lieutenant moved fast, yanking open a cabinet, pulling out a fire extinguisher and a small canister marked "Training Smoke, Non-Toxic." She stared at it like she'd forgotten it existed. Ethan nodded. "Good." He took the canister, moved to the far corner of the room, and cracked it open. White smoke poured out, thick and fast, rolling low and filling the basement like fog. Nora coughed. Marina panicked. Ethan kept his voice calm. "Cover Nora's mouth. Stay low. Rex will guide you." Rex's eyes cut to Ethan. The dog understood the shift in rules. Outside, the cultured voice paused. "What are you doing?" Ethan didn't answer. He stepped close to Rex and whispered the only words Rex needed. "Protect her." Rex's body trembled with controlled fury. Then the basement door began to cut. Not kicked, cut. A quiet mechanical grinding, someone using tools. The network had come prepared. Ethan's mind ran through options. He could shoot through the door when it opened. But if they had a flashbang, if they had gas, if they had numbers. He needed unpredictability. He needed them to make a mistake, so he gave them what they didn't expect. He started speaking, loud enough to carry through the smoke and the door. "Marina," he said, voice clear, "when you stole those documents, you saved more than your kid." Marina stared at him, confused and shaking. Ethan kept his voice steady, like he was talking to the whole building, like someone might be listening. "You saved the water," Ethan continued. "You saved every family downstream. And if they kill you, people will still know." The grinding at the door paused. The cultured voice outside said, colder now, "He's stalling." Ethan's eyes narrowed. Good. He wanted them impatient. He wanted them to rush. The door finally gave with a heavy groan. A sliver of darkness opened. Then two figures slipped in, moving low, weapons up, scanning through the smoke. They didn't know the basement layout. They didn't know where the people were. They were blind. Rex moved like a shadow. He didn't bark. He hit the first attacker from the side, clamping onto the man's thigh and yanking him down. The man screamed in shock as his weapon clattered. The second attacker swung his pistol toward the sound. Ethan stepped out of the smoke and drove a shot into the man's shoulder. The attacker fell back, grunting, trying to aim again. Rex released and launched again, teeth flashing, ending it. Ethan's heart hammered, but his hands stayed steady. More footsteps at the door. More shapes. They were coming in waves. Ethan yelled to the lieutenant, "Radio, now!" The lieutenant fumbled with the backup unit, hands shaking, trying to power it. Ethan fired again, keeping. Attackers pinned, driving them back with controlled shots, never wasting. Rex moved with him, a living weapon with a conscience, only biting when needed, only releasing when commanded. Then, through the smoke, Ethan saw the cultured man enter. He moved slow, calm, unafraid. He wore no tactical gear, no visible armor, just plain clothes and that faint smile. He raised a hand slightly, and the attackers slowed, like they took orders from him without needing words. He looked at Ethan through the smoke and said, almost kindly, "You're very capable." Ethan's voice was low. "Who are you?" The man smiled. "A solution." Ethan felt the chill spread, because that was exactly what the ordinary man on the ridge had been. A cleaner, an eraser. The man's gaze flicked past Ethan, toward Marina, and Nora crouched low behind shelves, Rex briefly leaving their side to engage. He said softly, "I don't enjoy children. They complicate things." Marina gasped. Nora whimpered. Ethan's vision tunneled. The man continued, "But I do enjoy efficiency. Give me the drive and you can walk away." Ethan's mouth curled into something not quite a smile. "You don't let people walk away." The man's eyes flickered. Amusement, admiration, boredom. "Sometimes I do, when they've earned it." Ethan's voice hardened. "Not today." The man sighed, as if disappointed. "Then we'll do this the hard way." He lifted his hand again. The remaining attackers surged forward. Ethan fired. Rex hit. The basement became chaos of smoke and shadows and muffled screams. And then, in the middle of it, the lieutenant shouted, "I have a signal!" Ethan's head snapped. "Broadcast!" The lieutenant's hands shook as she keyed the mic. Her voice broke through the radio line, loud and urgent, spilling into whatever dispatch channel still lived. "Officer down. Active assault at Page PD. Suspects armed. Coordinated. We have a civilian witness with evidence of—" A shot cracked through the smoke. The lieutenant jerked back, crying out, clutching her arm. Ethan's chest tightened. The cultured man's smile returned. "You thought you could call for help." Ethan's voice was ice. "Help isn't the plan." The man tilted his head. "Then what is?" Ethan's eyes tracked the smoke, the shadows, the attackers hesitating now that the radio call had gone out. He answered softly, "Exposure." Because Ethan had already sent Drew everything he could from his phone earlier. Photos, GPS coordinates, the name Red Mesa Renewables, the cave inlet. Drew's world didn't work on courage, it worked on leverage. And leverage worked faster when it couldn't be buried. Above them, distant sirens began to wail. Not one, many. The cultured man's expression tightened for the first time. He glanced toward the stairwell. Ethan saw it, the shift from hunter to calculator. The man didn't panic, he simply decided. He stepped back toward the door, and his team followed with disciplined speed. As he retreated, he looked at Ethan one last time and said quietly, "You should have stayed hidden on your ridge." Ethan's eyes stayed locked. "You should have left the kid alone." The man's smile vanished. Then he disappeared into the smoke and the dark above. Minutes later, the basement door burst open again, not with quiet tools, but with the heavy thunder of a response team. Officers poured in, weapons up, shouting commands. They found Ethan standing in smoke with blood on his sleeves, Rex bristling but obedient at his side, Marina clutching Nora like she'd never let go again. They found wounded attackers on the floor, and they found, cuffed and grimacing, the suited liaison from upstairs. Enough pieces, enough witnesses, enough noise that it couldn't be quietly erased anymore. Hours later, after statements and medics and Nora falling asleep with her face pressed into Rex's fur, a federal agent with tired eyes and a badge that actually meant something sat across from Marina. He listened. He didn't smile. He didn't dismiss her. When she finished, he said, "We've been tracking a network using green projects as cover for chemical movement and waste dumping across multiple states. Your documents connect dots we've been chasing for years." Marina's voice shook. "So, my dad—" The agent's jaw tightened. "Your dad was probably the first person who saw it with his own eyes." Marina's tears finally fell. Ethan stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching. He didn't feel victory. He felt the edge of a larger storm, because he'd seen the cultured man's calm, the way he withdrew, the way he wasn't truly defeated, just delayed. The agent turned to Ethan. "And you are?" Ethan's voice was quiet. A man who wanted to be left alone. The agent looked at Rex. Your dog saved lives tonight. Ethan glanced down at Rex. The dog's eyes were alert, protective, still listening for danger even here. Ethan said softly, "He's good at that." Outside, dawn broke over Page, Arizona, painting the sky pale gold. Sirens faded into distance. The world pretended it was normal again. Marina stepped out of the station later with Nora in her arms. Rex walking beside them, Ethan just behind, close enough to shield, far enough to let them feel like they were walking on their own. Nora looked up at Ethan, eyes heavy with sleep and fear. Are they going to come back? Ethan crouched to her level. They might try. Nora's lower lip trembled. I don't want them. Ethan's voice softened. Neither do I. Nora hugged Rex's neck. Rex leaned into her, solid and warm. Ethan looked out at the desert, at the endless rock and sky that had promised him escape. He understood now, with the clarity of someone who had tried to run too many times. The world didn't care where you hid. It only cared what you stood between, and Ethan Cole had just put himself between a child and a machine designed to crush anything human. He stood, shoulders squaring. Marina's voice was hoarse. What happens now? Ethan's gaze stayed on the horizon. Now, he said, we make sure your father didn't die for silence. Rex's ears lifted, as if he understood the word now, like it was a command. And as they walked into the thin morning light, Marina and Nora and Ethan and Rex, Ethan felt it in his bones. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the moment the story stopped being about land and became about survival, about truth, and about the kind of loyalty that doesn't flinch when the shadows come back for what they think belongs to them.